I am the Master of Ceremonies here today, so presiding with poise is a very relevant topic for me and for all of us. And specifically, Tamara Harris has the credentials to be teaching to us today. She is an NAP member, has lots of experience, and even from university times, she was on the Mathematical Society, a member there or chairing that. She's chaired her sorority and many other opportunities to chair. And I'm looking forward to learning more from her, but also learning from her why she joined the NAP, why she thought parliamentary procedures was relevant to somebody who knows all about math and statistics. Tamara Harris, if I'm inviting you to the virtual stage. Welcome to the virtual stage.
Mr. President, look, sir, you cannot accuse me of that. I have been working in this field for 30 years.
Mr. Marks.
I am the one.
Mr. Marks. Oh, Councilwoman.
I just did.
Mr. Marks. We will keep.
You're not from here, sir. You're not from here. You don't even know.
Mr.
You
Marks,
don't even
please.
know. You are not from here.
Councilwoman.
So what in the world did we just witness? We can't make this up. This was a live meeting and it's actually on YouTube. So before I begin into the presentation, greetings, members of the virtual parliamentarian Toastmasters and guests. I am Tamara D. Harris, PRP, and I am truly delighted to present a brief workshop entitled Presenting with Poise. Before I begin, I would like to thank President Tan Johnson and Vice President of Education, Penelope Bowen, I hope I said your last name correctly, distinguished Toastmaster, for a wonderful opportunity to present. So let's talk about this video. By show of virtual hands, how many of you have witnessed heated debates like the one you've just seen? Raise your virtual hands. Okay, it's extremely interesting, especially if you are the presiding officer trying to maintain your cool. You may lower your hand. So in the chat, can you just throw in a couple things that you saw wrong? You can just type it in the chat. What did you see wrong in the video? Talking over each other, yelling, all talking at once, not speaking through the chair. It got loud. Right. Did you all notice the people were getting up and walking out? The people who were in the assembly. The lady beside her got up, grabbed her stuff and left. Someone else left. The presiding officer was banging the gavel. All of these things should not be happening in your meeting. So we're going to talk about how you preside with poise. Now, I need you to remember this video because throughout this presentation, we're going to address a lot of these actions so that you will not perform in such a manner. And I am not beating up the Baltimore City Council. I just want you all to know. So for tonight's objective, we will discuss who is the chair, what makes a good chair, what are the chair's duties, what is needed to prepare for the meeting, the art of presiding, execution during the meeting, what to include in your script, what needs to be completed as a follow-up. So regarding questions, if you have any questions on a particular slide, I ask that in the chat, you type the question and the slide number. Oh, you'll just have to, I'll have to tell you the numbers because I forgot to add the numbers, but I'll make sure you get those. When we get to the end, we will answer any and all questions as much as we can within time. So before we begin, let me just warn you, I am a different type of speaker. I am very animated. My slides are very colorful. And if you're wondering why so much color tomorrow, because it is 7:00 p.m. on a Sunday night and Eastern time, and we want to go to bed. We get sleepy. So if I keep it if I keep the colors changing and I stay energetic, you'll be interested in what I have to say. So let's get started. When no special title has been assigned, or if you're in a body that is not permanently organized, such as a mass meeting, the presiding officer is normally called the chairman. So before anyone says, but our chair is a woman and I've known the chair for 20 years, we're going to explain a couple things according to RONR. At the meetings, the presiding officer should always be addressed by their official title. Mr. Madam President. The president is, if that is your presiding officer, should be addressed using their official title. Should the presiding officer serve as the chair temporarily or have no regular title, the presiding officer is then addressed Mr. or Madam Chairman. Understand there are acceptable variations of chairman, such as Mr. or Madam Chair. Oh, what happened to my slide? Some kind of way it duplicated. But you can call them Mr. and Ms. President, Mr. and Mrs. Chair, Chairperson. What we don't want to do is call them by their names. At no time should you address them by their names, no matter how long you've known them, how many secrets you may have of theirs. You always want to address them by their title. The official title must be used in a meeting. I cannot express that enough. It's also important that the chair speaks in third person. The chair is proud to announce that the unit received an outstanding service award. You don't want to use the word I. You want to say the chair. Now, rightly so, the chair should refrain from using the member's first name or nickname. You're not going to say, hey, Tammy, great report. No, you're going to say, thank you, Mr. Green, for an awesome report. Or you will refer to the member as the member, or Mr. or Miss, whatever their last name is. You do not want to use their first name. Now, throughout this presentation, you will hear me use the reference of chair, and sometimes you will hear me use presiding officer, but understand they are used interchangeably. Let's talk about the character traits of a good presiding officer. The presiding officer, first and foremost, must have the ability to command the assembly. And as we saw in the video, he didn't quite have command of the assembly. The assembly was in chaos. Now, this doesn't mean that the chair screams. It doesn't mean that they yell at the assembly members, but the chair must be able to control the meeting by ensuring decorum is maintained and protecting the members. They must also have and utilize good common sense. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, common sense isn't always common. We're going to discard that notion because we're talking about presiding officers, and we want to make sure we use good common sense. The chair should bear in mind that he is placed in the chair to preserve order. And the greater the disorder, the greater the need to exercise self-control and good common sense. A great presiding officer is always tactful and courteous, even when members are speaking very passionately. And when I say passion, their tones tend to escalate and they just start using hands and the tones become unbearable. Even when members are doing that, you as the presiding officer must always use tact and be courteous. The presiding officer must maintain their temperament throughout the entire meeting. Now, I'll tell you, sometimes this is hard, especially if you're in an organization who's doing a bylaw revision or a bylaw change. Sometimes it can be a little difficult. but you have to work hard to keep your composure. The chair should also be gentle but firm when interacting or responding to the assembly. Now, this doesn't mean you are no longer courteous or tactful. It means that as the presiding officer, you should remain cool and calm. A good presiding officer realizes this is extremely vital in maintaining order and control, because if you as a presiding officer loses it, 9 times out of 10, the members are going to lose it also. So you have to be that person to stand firm and maintain order and control. Another very important trait is impartiality. The chair's ability to remain impartial will increase the members' confidence in that chair to be fair. Now, even when all of these important qualifications or character, with these important qualifications or character traits, it is extremely necessary for the presiding officer to be familiar with the fundamental principles of parliamentary law and with the bylaws and governing documents or rules of the organization. Without this basic knowledge, the presiding officer will find it difficult with rising issues or be unable to make informed decisions. And we need our presiding officer to be able to handle such issues, so they have to be knowledgeable. Anyone serving in the role of the presiding officer, they have to do their homework and prepare for the role. That means you go read your rules, you read your governing documents, your Robert's rules, your standing rules, if you have any other special rules, whatever you have, you read them to make sure that when you come to the table, you are coming to the table correctly. Now, there are 3 basic tips for presiding officers. The basic tips are: 1, know yourself. 2, know your organization. 3, know your governing documents. So let's kind of dissect this a little bit. Have you ever attended a meeting and the presiding officer was dry as a desert? And you find yourself wandering off in your mind, you're making grocery lists, you turn your camera off, you run down to the kitchen, cook dinner, you come back, oh, okay, he's still talking. You're just not engaged. How many of you have done that? Don't raise your hand, it's rhetorical. But I'll tell you, I am so guilty. When the presiding officer cannot keep my attention, I completely zone out. And then I come back and say, oh, what was he saying? Oh, I missed something. How did she get down here? So if you are a presiding officer, you need to practice a little saying that I learned as a child. Enthusiasm is contagious. So if you're energetic and you're enthusiastic about the topic that you're presenting, your members will be enthusiastic about gleaning that information from you. So we want to make sure that we are enthusiastic. Secondly, you want to be even-tempered. You have to know when you've gotten to the point where you're ready to explode, or as the kids say, you're ready to clap back. You have to know when you are there. When you get to that point and you feel you are at a level 9 of 10, you may want to take a moment, place the assembly at ease, step away from the podium or turn off your camera, take some deep breaths, and calm yourself down. After you have gathered yourself, you'll call the assembly back to order and then proceed. This is a neat trick to assist you with calming not only your temper or your frustration, it helps calm the tempers in the room. And lastly, you want to remain unbiased. If you are not in favor of a motion, as the chair and you are seated, you can't speak to that motion. You can't insert your biases into that motion. If you really need to speak on something that you feel passionately about, you must relinquish the seat, and you cannot take the seat again until that motion has been disposed. Now, this should not be a common practice. Every time a new chair comes up and they have a motion, you should not relinquish your seat every time. That should not happen. You are permitted to do it, but it shouldn't be common practice, because then your members start to lose a little faith in you as their presiding officer. So you want to make sure that you are practicing good parliamentary procedure there. The second basic tip is know your organization. Know its purpose, its history, the vision, the mission. If you understand the goals and the objectives of the organization, it will assist you in conveying where the organization is currently and where it intends to go. Lastly, it's vitally important to understand the governing documents of your organization for all levels. So, for example, with the National Association of Parliamentarians, which we lovingly call NAP, under NAP, you have the national umbrella, you have your districts, then you have associations, and then you have units. As you can see, the unit is the lowest level of NAP. If you are a unit presiding officer, you should be familiar with the NAP bylaws, the bylaws of the association, as well as the unit's bylaws. This is most helpful when someone puts forth a motion that is in opposition of the organization's governing documents. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So Johnny Green, who is a member of the ABC unit of the National Association of Parliamentarians, he moves that all members are deemed registered parliamentarians once they pass the membership exam. Now, I'm not going to ask you whether this is right or wrong, but most of us know this is not right. You can't do this, because NAP's bylaws, Article 3, Section 1, states to qualify for an RP, a regular member shall successfully complete the requirements designated by the Commission on Credentialing. So what does this tell you? This tells you that a member cannot, in a unit, impose a rule that is in direct conflict with the national organization. As the presiding officer, you need to know that. You need to be able to stand up and firmly say why this is out of order. And in order to do so, you must know your governing documents, not just for the association, the unit you're in, not just for your chapter, but you need to know it for all levels. Now, you're not going to know everything word by word, verbatim, but you really need to be familiar with it, and definitely have it at your side when you are presiding. Before we move on to the next section, are there any questions? I don't see any hands raised, and there are no questions in the chat. So either I'm confusing you all or I'm telling you something you already knew. Either way, let's move forward. Before anyone accepts the role of a presiding officer, they should ensure they understand the duties of the presiding officer. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the duties of the presiding officer based on RONR Section 47, Paragraph 7. To meet the first duty of the presiding officer is to call the meeting to order at the appointed time, having determined that a quorum is present. So to ensure everybody understands the definition of quorum, I don't want to assume everyone knows. A quorum is the minimum number of voting members who are present to validly transact business. And you can find that in Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition, Section 3, Paragraph 3. Secondly, they are to announce in proper sequence the business that comes before the assembly or becomes in order in accordance with the prescribed order of business, agenda, or program, and with the existing orders of the day. So that's their second duty. Their third duty, to recognize members entitled to the floor. 4, to state in full and put to a vote all legitimate motions that are moved and seconded. In order to do this, you need to read and understand Section 4 of RO&R. Section 4 talks about handling motions. So you want to make sure, if you're not familiar with it, you want to go ahead and read that section. The chair should also be able to explain the effect that an amendment will have on the motion that it ends to modify. So if the motion is, I move that the unit purchases a computer for Secretary Tamara Harris, and member Johnny Green makes a motion to amend by striking computer and inserting 2024 Tesla, well, you know, Secretary Harris is going to be for that. So you, as the presiding officer, better be certain that your members understand what the effect of the amendment will be on the motion if it is adopted. And before all my credentialed parliamentarians get their feathers in a ruffle, let me tell you now, I will be using colorful motions strictly for the purpose of drawing your attention. So let's make sure everybody understands before I get 10,000 text messages, emails, and chat messages. Now, the chair must also restate the motion as it stands after the amendment's adoption or rejection. So if the amendment is adopted, it is inserted, then the chair will then go back and read the immediate pending motion. And I say immediate pending motion because it may have been a secondary amendment that was adopted. Now we're inserting that into the primary. Once that's adopted, if it is adopted, then that will be inserted into the main motion. So I want to make sure that that is clear. The chair must also put to vote all questions that legitimately come before the assembly as motions or that arise in the course of proceedings, and they must announce the result of each vote. So all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. So moved. The motion is adopted. Now, one piece that I do find that is sometimes left out by the presiding officer, you have to state what we just voted on. So you want to state the ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The unit will buy Secretary Harris a 2024 Tesla. Thank you all very much. I do appreciate it. So you want to make sure that you restate it so that it is clear and everyone understands what we voted on. The chair should rule out of order any motion if it is not in order at the time, or suggest an alternative that is in order. They must protect the assembly from obviously dilatory motions by ruling that such motions are not in order. Please understand, I said ruling that the motions are not in order and not that the member is out of order. So you want to make sure that you're talking about what it is they're addressing and not, I'm going to pick on Kim because I see her. Kim, you're out of order. No, you do not want to do that. The motion is out of order. The chair should also enforce the rules of debate and decorum. You want to make sure that you understand when we are debating, you want to have alternating sides. Those that are for, those that are against, those that are for, those that are against, or not against, in opposition. The other thing is you want to make sure that they are maintaining decorum. That one, you're speaking to the presiding officer and not addressing the members. I've been in meetings where I've heard members call out other men. Well, I'm talking to so-and-so. That's not what we do. All questions are addressed to the presiding officer. And as the presiding officer, if you find that members are beginning to address one another, you bring them back and you say, please address all questions to the presiding officer or to the chair. The chair must also expedite business in every way compatible with the rights of the members. So we are not going to take away the members' rights because, I want to go to the movies at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to hurry up and end this so I can leave here by 8:30. No, that's not what we're doing. We want to make sure we want to expedite the business in a way, one, we're not infringing on the rights of the members, but that we are doing it in accordance with parliamentary law as well as our governing documents. Any questions before we move on to meeting preparation? So I warned you all, you were going to see a lot of colors. So this should keep you up and entertained. In the chat, can you place a couple things that you do to prepare for a meeting? Whether you're serving as the presiding officer for your organization or as the presiding officer for another organization, what do you do to prepare? Right, a lot of people are saying, good one, Dan. Dan says, put on clothes. Good one. But prepare an agenda. Develop a script. Yes, Penelope, develop a script. And we're definitely going to be hitting on that. Read the agenda and the governing documents. Work with the secretary on the agendas. Know the recommendations that are coming forth. Very good. Be on time. Woo, that is the biggest one for me. And we are definitely going to talk about that. So let's talk about understand your assignment. If you are the presiding officer, you need to understand your assignment. And your question to yourself is, over what type of meeting am I presiding? Is it a regular meeting? Is this meeting going to be contentious? What are the hot topics? Are you presiding over a special meeting that only has one agenda item? Or are you presiding at a convention? If you are, what part of the convention agenda are you responsible for? You need to know your task before you go into this meeting. You don't want to go into it blind. You want to understand what it is that they expect you to do so that you can be well prepared. You also want to know who is the target audience. A presiding officer should know their target audience. Presiding over a small board is completely different from presenting at a convention of 5,000 to 10,000 people. Presiding at a regular meeting unit that has amenable members and we're all singing Kumbaya, to go to presiding at a bylaw convention where everybody's up in arms. It's totally different. So you definitely have to know your audience. The presiding officer needs to know if it's a church group where the only thing they know about Robert's Rules of Order, it was written a long time ago by some man named Robert. That's all they know. And they say it, well, we use Robert's Rules of Order, but they don't know it. Or it may be a school board where the school board says, we're not following that. We've been doing it this way for 40 years and we're going to continue to do it that way. So you have to be prepared and explain. You have to be prepared to explain the governing documents as well as parliamentary law on a level that anyone in the room can understand, regardless of who it is. So a lot of people put in the chat, you need to know what's on your agenda. And you do as the presiding officer. The presiding officer should review the previous meeting minutes to determine if there's any unfinished business or order from the previous meeting. The presiding officer should know who is expected to present a report. And based on this information, they should have agenda prepared and disseminated to the membership before the meeting. In preparing for the meeting, the presiding officer may want to confer with the organization's officers or committee chairs to determine if there are any motions that will be presented or recommendations presented to the assembly. Why is this important? You can put that in your script if you already know the motion, and that way it's easy for you to go through your script, state the motion, pass it along, do everything you need to do. That way, once you're at that meeting, it's easy peasy. Now, there will be some problems, but we'll be equipped to handle that, and I'll tell you how when we get to the script. You want to be as well informed about things that will come before the assembly as possible. The other person you should confer with is your parliamentarian. Now, this person should definitely know the governing documents as well as parliamentary law. They should be able to help you get through this. You want to present all the information that you've gathered and review it with the parliamentarian. Work together to craft your script, which we are going to discuss momentarily. Now, you need to know what documents are needed. The presiding officer should gather a copy of the organization's bylaws. You need to know the applicable laws. I was on a workshop earlier today, and we were talking in general about quorum, and I'm answering, based off what I know on quorum, but the presenter was in New York, so he stated New York law, which supersedes Robert's Rules of Order as well as our governing documents. So you need to understand wherever you are and what state you're residing, what are the rules for your state? Because like in the state of New York, it was 10% of a membership is your minimum quorum, which, wow, who would have thought? I wouldn't have thought that. Maybe our organization, and in this example, the organization had as their quorum was 25, which they're in breach of the applicable law of the land. So you need to understand that. It seems weird, like, why are they doing it? But as we know, the laws of the land are the highest ranking laws. We cannot trump them. Also, if you are visiting or a hired presiding officer, you need to know what their parliamentary authority is. You can't assume that it's Robert's Rules of Order because there are so many authorities that people use. So although Robert's Rules of Order, I believe, is used by 80% of the organizations across the globe, there are other ones that use Demeter, AIP. I learned today Masons. I didn't know. I'm learning. I'm still learning. So you want to make sure you understand what that organization's parliamentary authority is if you are an invited presiding officer. I also recommend that before that meeting, you print out your script. Some people like to have it on the electronic device, which is absolutely fine, but you also want to have a backup. Have a printed copy of your script. Electronics they're the best thing in the world until they don't work. Wi-Fi connection goes down, you left the laptop charger at home, computer dies. You definitely want to make sure that you have a backup just so you can you can keep your meeting moving forward and address any questions. Another little handy resource is motion sheets. If you don't use motion sheets, you may want to start using them, especially for those who are now moving back to in-person meetings. For a lot of virtual meetings, people are instructing their members to put the motions in the chat. Either put them in the chat or use motion sheets. The reason you do this is so that the presiding officer can restate the question to the assembly. Because if you did not know, I'm going to tell you now. If the member says, I move to buy Secretary Harris a 2024 Tesla toy car, and the presiding officer says, It is moved and seconded to buy Secretary Harris a 2024 Tesla, and they don't add toy car, and we vote on Tesla, your intent means nothing. It's what we voted on. So whatever that chair states is what you're voting on. So you want to make sure that as a presiding officer, you have the exact language in which you're voting on. Now, can you change that? Yes, but that's not this lesson. That's a whole different lesson. But if you read Robert's Rules of Order, you can figure it out. Any questions so far before we move on to the art of presiding? So with Penelope, with New York State, apparently
I have a question.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'll be right with you. Is it Jean?
Yes, Jan Paul.
Okay, Jean Paul, I'll be right with you. I'm answering Penelope's question. It was just an example. The 10% of your total membership is the minimum quorum of. That's one of the requirements. There were a couple other little things that I didn't remember offhand, but that was for the state of New York. So that is a state statute. That was just an example for this. So I would encourage you to read the state statute, because I know I have to go back and double check Maryland's just to make sure there's nothing hidden that I've missed. Jean-Paul and then Sharice.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the concept of a motion sheet. Is that kind of the standard, say, 8 steps to remind you of the steps? First, that there's a motion, and then somebody seconds, etc., and then at the end, after voting, you basically repeat what has been decided. Is that what you're referring to as a motion sheet?
No, so that would what you're describing, you would include in your script. So you would put so for me, when I write scripts, I have what's in my script, but then I have like supplements. If a motion is made that I wasn't aware of, I'll put each step in there with blanks so I can fill it in as I go along. A motion sheet is it's an actual form, and if you go on, if you want, you can go on NAP's website in the store. They have motion sheets, and it lists the name of the maker. It asks you to state your motion. You write it out. It has the date, and that's it. You turn it into the presiding officer. The presiding officer uses it to read the motion. Sharice, your hand's raised.
Yes. So my question is around the agenda. And typically we have the same agenda every month. You know, we have the minutes, I have our officers' reports, I have our committee reports, et cetera, right? But I want us to be a little more effective, and I want to begin to move some of the reports around, especially when those reports have recommendations attached to them, so that those reports are earlier during our meetings when people are there and can vote. But I'm a little skittish about doing that because I'm afraid I might get challenged from our membership, because I want to move maybe the bylaws committee up, but maybe still keep the fundraising committee report farther down on the agenda. How would I tackle that without getting pushback?
You would have to look at your documents. One, you would have to look at your governing document to see if you have a standard order of business listed in there. If there's no standard order of business, then you would default to Robert's Rules of Order. So Robert's Rules of Order gives a suggested listing. They have a standard order of business in there, but your chapter can prepare its agenda and list the items. It is stated that you should list them in the way they are listed in your bylaws. So if your bylaws committee is first, then you can list them first and go forward. Now, the thing with the agenda, the thing with the agenda is you can, a member can make a motion to move things on the agenda. So you can put it out there. If you keep it, your agenda, if your agenda is standard and you want to move, you can ask, is there any objection to moving the bylaws committee report after the treasurer's report? You can put that out there. If there's no objection, you can, by unanimous consent, you can move it. If there is an objection, then you vote on it. If the members want it, they'll do it. If they don't, they don't. I think that's the easiest way to do it. For me. Now, I do have some gurus on here like Atul who may be able to tell you a better way, but you kind of follow your governing documents and how they're listed. If it's a standard form that you all use out of custom, you can move things around, but it would have to be at the approval of the body. The body's going to adopt the agenda regardless. Well, they should adopt the agenda regardless.
So thank you for your help on this. It sounds like I would move it, but at the beginning of the meeting where I ask for the adoption of the agenda every meeting, I will note the slight change and the rationale for it, and then the membership would either agree or disagree. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I'm not sure who Neurodiverse Leadership Toastmasters is, but thank you for putting that form there. And Daniel, to answer your question, where should you search for state statutes? Google. I would just go in there and type in, like for me, I'll go and type in Maryland. Or like for Maryland, we have COMAR, Code of Maryland Annotated Regulations, I believe it is. So you can go in there and put in, you know, different keywords and it'll pull it up. So I'm not exactly sure how to tell you how to drill down. I just use Google for everything. It's my best friend. Okay, let's keep going because I think I have 20 minutes left, but I should be done before that. Let's talk about the art of presiding. In addition to the information stated earlier in the presentation, here are a few suggestions to help you perfect your art form as a presiding officer. Arrive to the meeting location early, regardless if it's Zoom. You should not be logging in the same time the members are logging in. And what I was trained, how I was trained was, if you arrive on time, you're late. One, you want to get there on time so that you can test your equipment, make sure you have everything set up. And if you've ever been to oh, thank you, Atul. He put it in the chat, Daniel. If you've ever been to a meeting in person or virtual, there's always that member that has one more question. I just got one little question. It'll be real quick. And it's never a quick question. And before you know it, you've wasted 15 minutes trying to explain when you needed that time to prepare. So you definitely want to make sure you arrive early. You want to know your quorum going in. You shouldn't start the meeting and someone say, well, do we have a quorum? And you say, I don't know. You really want to know the quorum before you go in. Who can tell me, put it in the chat, where do you find your quorum? How do you know what your quorum is? Where is it? In your bylaws. Awesome. Thank you. In your bylaws, your quorum should, the bylaws should state what your organization's quorum is. If it is not in there, and Robert's Rules of Order is your parliamentary authority, does anybody know what your quorum is? If it's not in your bylaws and RONR is your parliamentary authority, what is the quorum? We gotta be careful with the 50+1. Thank you, Dan. Majority of the voting membership. So 50+1 is not a majority because it could be 50.4. That is still more than half. So you want to be very careful with the +1. Some organizations may have it in their bylaws like that, But if it's not, and it says you need a majority is anything above 50, and it could be 50.0678%. Sounds weird, but that's more than a majority. So thank you. Also, you want to make sure you understand a majority. When you say majority, if one participant put in the chat majority of the voting membership, the other one put majority, there is a significant difference. Majority of the voting membership means everybody on your roster, everybody that is a full-fledged member, you have to have a majority of that list. If you just say majority, it's a majority of those that's there. So you want to be very clear on when it is a majority or when it is a majority of voting membership. And if you don't have a quorum in your bylaws, it is the majority of your voting membership. Start on time. I think I've stated this early. This is my biggest pet peeve. Please start on time. Especially, I'm gonna give you all a scenario. I went to a conference that was in California. Now I'm from the East Coast. Everybody know California's 3 hours behind us. You call for an 8 o'clock meeting, 8 a.m. meeting. I'm just like, okay. I'm sorry, not 8 a.m., 8 p.m. meeting. We had an 8 p.m. meeting. It was for our opening session. It started 2 hours late, which was 10 o'clock California time, which is 1 a.m. my time. I was hot like fish grease. So you want to make sure you respect your members' time and start on time. Good gavel use. We want to make sure we use proper gavel use. So depending on your organization, your opening ceremony may require the meeting to open with a rap of the gavel. It may require it to close. But in Roberts 2120 says that a single rap of the gavel, if desired, may be used to signal adjournment. Now, in that video, how many people think the chair did the right thing, rapping the gavel, trying to get the attention of the members? You can just raise your hand. We won't judge you. This is a judgment-free zone. Nobody? Nobody? Awesome. Great answer. The answer is no, that is not correct. In 61.9, it states that under no circumstances should the chair attempt to drown out a disorderly member either by his own voice or the gavel, or permit himself to be drawn into a verbal duel. So we don't want to beat the gavel like we saw in that video. I just wanted you all to wake up, so I used the gavel. Use a watch, a stop clock, or a timekeeper. You want to make sure that people stay on time, and Toastmasters is very good for this. They have the red card, the yellow card, no, green card, yellow card, red card. If you see the red card, boy, you are in trouble. So we want to make sure that we are using timekeepers or clocks to keep everyone on task. And then as a presiding officer, you want to understand the roles of all your officers. Why is this important? It's like you get a new car and it has all these features. You need to be able to understand them. You want to be able to understand, if I put the positive on the negative, does that work? Or how do I do this? If I put a 20 amp fuse into a 5 amp, does that work? You need to understand how everything works together. One, so you can make sure that you and your officers are doing their roles and staying in their lanes and not veering off into someone else's lane. You want to move the meeting expeditiously. Ensure that you address the agenda items, utilize unanimous consent when possible and proper. And I say proper because if the bylaws require a valid vote, you cannot use unanimous consent. You also want to recognize members desiring to speak. If you don't know, let's make sure that you understand that in accordance to Robert's Rules of Order, the maker of the motion has the first right to speak. Typically, they are speaking in favor of their motion. Now, stranger things have happened, but typically they are in favor of their motion. So the presiding officer will then see if anyone wishes to speak in opposition, and the debate will continue alternating sides. You want to enforce decorum and rules debate. We talked about this earlier, so we're not going to dwell on this, but see section 4. Acknowledge and address interrupting motions. Can somebody put a couple interrupting motions in the chat, please? Point of order. Awesome. Request for information. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. We also have objection to the consideration of a question. And I've only seen that done once, and I was so excited. Parliamentary inquiry. Yes. Call for the orders of the day. So these are things that must be addressed by the chair. It is very important that the chair recognizes motion abuse. What is motion abuse, Tamara? What are you talking about? When a member uses an interrupting motion to debate. So 39.4, section 39.4, and we're talking the RO&R 12th edition, it is the duty of the presiding officer to prevent members from misusing the legitimate forms of motions or abusing the privilege of renewing certain motions merely to obstruct business. So, for example, one of the things that I've seen, requests for information. Please don't say point of clarification. Request for information. This is one of the most abused motions. I've seen people give history lessons. Back in 1941, when we first started, we did this. That is not what request for information is. It means you want to get information. You're not giving information. That's debate. That's not for this. So you want to make sure that you understand the interrupting motions and what they're used for. You want to rule out of order improper, dilatory, or frivolous motions. And in section 39, there is a paragraph that talks about dilatory and improper motions. If you know your organization has members that seek to interrupt, obstruct, or thwart your meeting, you as the presiding officer should become very familiar with this section. And that way you can handle that. The other thing is consult with the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is my favorite person in the room. He's like Johnny on the spot. When the presiding officer gets stuck or goes a little off track, a good parliamentarian is there to keep them on track. You know, they'll lean over, write them a little note, or speak gently in their ear, give them the rules, and offer their advice. Now, the parliamentarian is not to be used as the presiding officer's crutch. The presiding officer should have some knowledge of parliamentary law, as well as an understanding of those governing documents. The parliamentarian is strictly the advisor, and a great parliamentarian will ensure that your presiding officer is well equipped and ready for the meeting and on all problems that may arise during the meeting. We're almost done. Hang in there with me, guys. As the presiding officer, make sure you understand that members have a right to appeal the decision of the chair. That doesn't mean that you get mad and adjourn the meeting, where I've had people, I was serving as the parliamentarian and the presiding officer got mad and wanted to close the meeting. That's not what that means. It means that the member simply doesn't agree with what the chair has ruled. And they want the assembly to decide if the chair's ruling should be sustained. Now, once this happens, you have to determine the temperament of the room. It may not feel like people are on your side, but ultimately, you just need to process that appeal without any problems. So the way the appeal works, a member appeals, someone seconds it, the chair will speak, the members will speak, the chair will speak one more time, then the assembly will vote. And in that, the motion is, shall the chair's ruling be sustained? If it is yes, if we vote that it's sustained, then we move forward and we go head on in agreement with the chair. So read the section on appeals, because that's not this lesson. So read that. State and puts the question to a vote. It does state and puts. There are two different things, and in section 4, it breaks down the two different things. So the states, it is moved and seconded to do X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. We have our debate. The question before the body is blah, 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 blah. All those in favor, all those in opposition, and then you continue. Explain the vote requirement. If it's not a majority vote, then explain that it requires a large majority, 2/3, 3/4, whatever the requirement is for that particular motion. Make sure that you explain that when you are putting the vote before the body. There are some cards that are available, or if you have the big book, I call it, if you have the 12th edition, in the back of the book, there's a chart to tell you the voting requirements for the motion. So you want to make sure you become familiar with that. So make sure that you know when to vote. In accordance with 4412, the presiding officer, if the presiding officer, member of the assembly, can vote as any other member when the vote is by ballot. In all other cases, the presiding officer can vote, but is not obligated to do so whenever his vote will affect the result. Meaning the officer can vote to effect the result of a tie vote or a 2/3 vote. So you want to make sure that you understand that. Definitely read 4412. For me personally, as a presiding officer, if it's an open vote, meaning we're raising hands, I typically won't vote, but that's just me. I won't vote because I understand that position is a power position, and I don't want people to vote the way that I vote. I want them to vote their own conscience. Announce the voting results clearly. And in section 4, paragraph 43, it outlines the 3 points that a chairman should cover. So points 1 and 2 kind of go hand in hand, where point 1 tells which side has it, and point 2 declares whether the motion is adopted or lost. Point 3 is a statement that indicates the effect of the vote, and we've talked about that, so I'm not going to belabor that. And end on time. Lastly, you want to end on time. If your meeting is scheduled to adjourn at a particular time and there are additional items, make the assembly aware that the time for adjournment has arrived. Most assemblies, if knowledgeable, they will fix the time to which to adjourn and move to suspend the rules to extend the time of the meeting. So make sure that you are knowledgeable about those procedures as well. So you want to follow protocol. While the chair is seated, the chair should, one, ensure that he can see everyone in the room. Now, this is a little hard if you're presiding over a convention of a large number of people. So you want to make sure that you can see the microphones, or there are microphone monitors to assist. But you want to make sure that you can see your members as well as they can see you. Ensure your secretary and parliamentarian they're seated in close proximity to you so that you can have discreet communication. You don't want to yell down the platform, "Hey, Madam Secretary, what were we supposed to do?" No, you want them to be close to you so that you can have discreet communication. Should you desire to speak in debate, you must relinquish the chair. We talked about that earlier, and you cannot take the seat again until that motion has been disposed. And the chair also remains seated and relinquishes the chair when the motion is made that refers to the chair alone. So, and there's an exception. The last rule doesn't apply when the motion relates to elections. So if it's something like a censure of the chair, then the chair remains seated. That's not for the chair to stand up and preside over. The chair should stand when they call the meeting to order or taking a recess or adjourning. Let me go back. Thank you. Or adjourning the meeting. When they're stating and putting the question, calling a breach, ruling on a point of order, speaking in debate on an appeal, addressing an interrupted motion, such as parliamentary inquiry or request for information. At those times, the chair will stand. The chair should sit or step back when the minutes or reports are being read when the floor has been assigned, unless there is an obstruction to the view of the speaker or the assembly. So I do see a question, what is calling a breach? If a member is putting a motion before the body and it's not in order at this time, or if the member is speaking without being assigned the floor, that's what I mean by a breach. So let's talk about script preparation. Why is it important? The presiding officer should have written scripts basically to ensure that the business of the organization is handled in the proper order and that the parliamentary procedure is followed and that the correct terminology is used. Having a written script will bring a sense of confidence to the presiding officer. Using a script will help the least experienced presiding officer conduct the meeting with confidence. And a lot of new presiding officers use a script. It will take away a lot of your anxiety. It also helps other officers, chairs, or members with speaking roles. So when I'm presiding, I encourage everybody to prepare your script, and we'll put it in the program script, which is the big script for everyone. We put everything in there. That way we know what we're going to say and we're not looking crazy. I even encourage, if your organization has a ritual, of reciting a prayer or a different ceremony type, I'll write everything out. Even if the prayer is very short and I've been saying it for 25 years, and I still write it out because you just never know. I actually drew blank on reciting the Pledge of Allegiance once. I will admit it. I'm so sorry. But I know it, but I just had a brain fog. So you want to make sure that you write it out. It gives you so much more confidence. I think I skipped a blurb. Oh, no, I did that. So here are some, in one of the resources that I cite at the end, this is what the format is. And this came from Script Writing Made Easy. You want to have generous margins. Leave the margins so you can take notes in the margins, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches on each side. That way you can take notes. Use large font. They recommend 14. I personally use 16 because my eyesight isn't as good as it used to be. So you have to figure out what works best for you. Serif or sans serif font, a more block or square font makes it easier to read, especially when you have a long presentation to be read. It's recommended 1.5 spaces. I personally like 2.0. I like 2 double lines because I like to take notes in between the lines. I use italics to add emphasis. Brackets are used like for instruction. This is the part you don't read aloud, but it gives you the instructions for this section. So for example, when you're doing unanimous consent, if there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. In the brackets, I would put pause. That's just to remind me to wait to see if there are any objections. I use color. I color code my brackets. I color code the titles so I know where I am in each section. So use color to help with your script. Bold caps. When using scripts for conferences, webinars, meetings, use bold caps to signify the name change. It helps draw your eye to that. And do your script on one side and make sure you number your pages, because the funniest thing ever is when you accidentally knock the pages off the platform and you go to pick them up and you don't know what order they're in. Make sure you number them, put them on one side so you could just turn the page, or if you have the type of lectern that has a pocket, you can put the old page underneath. That way it's totally out of your way. Now we're going to talk a little bit about content. The first thing you want to start with is your organization's open or closing rituals. So for my NAP unit, we began with the pledge. So I make sure I include the Pledge of Allegiance in my script. For my other organizations, we have a full ceremony. I make sure that's in my script. Even though I show it on the screen, I still put it on my script. Add the agenda headings. You want to do that first. Put everything in there that's on your agenda. Add the names of your speakers that will be speaking under each heading. Then you want to add your text, and you want to make sure that you're using the proper terminology. So if you have the script writing made easy or the presidentially speaking manual, they give great examples of how your script should look. You want to add instructions. It's recommended to put your instruction in a bracket, like I said, to pause. This ensures, and you make sure you tell your speaker, if you're the parliamentarian preparing for the presiding officer, make sure you tell them, hey, don't read that part. It's funny if they're reading, they go pause, and the whole audience falls out laughing. It's actually been done before. Standard descriptive characteristics of motions. I include this in my content, in my script, because if I know that, let's say, the main motion, we know there's going to be a main motion. I put in everything for the main motion. Can it interrupt? Can it be amended? Can it be debated? What is the vote required? Why do I put it there? It helps me move my meeting more efficiently, and I don't have to go pull out my Roberts to figure out what the character descriptives are. So before we get to follow-up, and I'm almost done, to address Penelope's questions, how does standing and sitting work in Zoom or hybrid meetings? Of course, it's very different. If you are in a Zoom meeting, you're not sitting and standing. That's primarily for when you're in person, or if it's hybrid, you're at the in-person portion of it. So you would just not talk or interrupt when you've given someone else the floor. That's pretty much it. So for follow-up, we finished our meeting. Now what? You want to review your meeting notes that you've written in your margins or on the page. You want to make sure that whatever you had in your meeting notes that need to be carried over to the next meeting, or you need to confer with the committee chairs on something, you want to make sure you go through that so you can do more research or get the information to the correct individuals. You want to confer with the secretary to ensure the motions were recorded properly, and that the actions that should be taken are referred to the committees that are assigned those tasks. Now, if you don't have a minutes approval committee, review the draft of the minutes prior to dissemination to the assembly. If there is an established minutes approval committee, review the approved minutes to ensure what has been prepared is correct, because you can challenge the minutes approval committee, but you want to make sure you review it before it goes out. And also you're reviewing it because it's going to help you create the agenda for the next meeting. You want to confer with the parliamentarian to review the execution of parliamentary law. This is on my personal checklist to ensure that I properly execute procedures. So after I have a meeting, after I preside, I meet with my parliamentarian to say, okay, what did I do wrong? How can I improve? Did I miss something? Did I state this? Did I do that? I do that to make me a better presiding officer. And that's when you come into the last part, evaluate yourself in the meeting. Be honest with yourself. Yes, I know Tamara is fantastic. I just love her. But I need to make sure Tamara presided in the best way that she could, using the governing documents, using parliamentary law, using the agenda, and respecting all of the members. So you have to do a self-evaluation. So here are the resources that I have, and all of these can be found on NAP website. Let me just give a disclaimer. I am not making any commission off anything. These are just resources that I use, and I'm just sharing them with you. So please feel free to go there. And are there any questions?
Good evening, Miss Tamara. How are you? It's Miss Eddie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. My question is, if we're having Zoom meetings and you have your parliamentarian, you have your presiding chair, and they're in two different time zones, how would you suggest the parliamentarian handle any interruptions or things that happen during that Zoom meeting without offending our presiding? You get what I'm trying to ask you?
Yeah. So there are a couple things that I've done and I've actually recommended. So if I am in Baltimore and Miss Eddie, you're, let's say, California.
Yeah, I'm in Las Vegas.
Okay, Las Vegas, you're the presiding officer and I am your parliamentarian. I will say, hey, can you put an earbud in your ear? And I'm going to call you on the phone. So that way I can still communicate with you. Now, for some people, that is difficult because they can't focus on the meeting and hear what needs to be done. So you type in the chat or you have an open text or something so you can easily communicate. But you have to figure out what works best for that presiding officer, because not everyone can look at the Zoom chat, look at their phone text, or be in your ear. You really have to figure out a procedure that works best for the presiding officer and the parliamentarian.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Atul. I'm getting nervous.
Never need to do that, Tamara. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing to your response to Eddie,
Mhm.
is that if you're dealing with a chair remotely, I often encourage that chair to have an assistant in the room with them. The chair is doing a lot of work. They're handling the meeting. They have to check the agenda, make sure we're on time. And what you want to do to help your chair look good is you want to decompress that chair's cognitive workload. And so what I often do is often the chair's spouse or teenage child is there as the chair's tech assistant. So that person is checking whatever back channel we've arranged, whether it's text or WhatsApp or a phone call, and they're the one feeding messages to the chair, so that the chair's not the one who has to be looking at 5 different screens and stuff like that. So the chair can focus on chairing.
Thank you so much, Atul. Look, I learned something today because I have not thought of that. The only other thing that I've done is we'll have a dedicated breakout room where if the chair needs to put the assembly at ease, we'll go to the breakout room and we'll confer and then they'll come back. So, but what I try never to do is interrupt the chair, because it really, if you're always interrupting the chair, it breaks the credibility of the chair, in my opinion, because they're like, well, the chair doesn't know anything. Why don't we just have the parliamentarian get up there? And you don't want that. You want to make sure, one, your chair is well prepared, and two, you want to make sure that you still communicate discreetly, whether it's, you know, even if you raise your hand and then they go to the chat or something, but you don't want them to look bad at all. You really want to make sure that you have a discreet way of communication and a tool. I think that is so wonderful, and I will be using that. So thank you. Jean-Paul?
Yes, Madam Presenter, I would like to thank you, particularly for the section about the script, because I think it's important, and there was also Atul also touched on that, to make sure that the chair is relaxed, focused. Mm-hmm. And I love the practical things about, say, to have margins and to have double spacing. All of these practical things can just make the world of a difference. And one other thing that I can suggest, mm-hmm. that has helped me in the past, where I was, say, the district leader here, is to have dry runs. Yeah. So have dry runs. If it is in person, try to do it in the actual space. If it is online, try to use the exact same link, dial-in details, so that all the practical things are the same. You use the same account, etc. And that will also reduce the stress, especially if one expects a controversial meeting. So if the script, if it's a joint effort with not only the chair but also the parliamentarian and maybe someone else as well, the administration manager, the secretary, maybe it is very helpful to give the chair a kind of that confidence.
Thank you. That is true. And usually when I have presentations or people I'm serving as a parliamentarian, we do a dry run. And that's so we can try to iron out all the kinks, and I can help prepare that presiding officer. Yes, Ms. Tan. Hi.
How are you doing? You know, it's good to see you again. It's good to see you too again. We've been having a lot of lessons today. But just want to add, someone has sent me a direct comment regarding the motion pay. What is this? The motion form. I'm sorry. Just wanted to let everyone know the motion form. I think it's 3 pages or 4 pages. The first page goes to I'm gonna say the president, the presiding officer, and then there's a page for the second for the secretary. So you tear one page off, you get that to the presiding officer, so that presiding officer can read the motion that's being presented. Another page goes to the secretary, I believe, and I think there's a third page to that. I don't have one right-handed with me. I'm in a different location, but I believe it's 3 pages, right?
To the third page is for the maker.
Okay, the third page is for the maker. Okay, I know it's a white. The first one is white that goes to the president. I think the second one is either pink or yellow, and then and the third page, So someone put, can we have a page? It's more than a page. It's a whole pack that we can order from. That you can order from the NAP website. So it's just not 1 page. It's 3.
And Dan offered a very great suggestion in the chat. Online parliamentarian, have a secondary non-Zoom group chat system, Messenger, iMessage, Slack, etc., with several officers who are in the room with the presiding officer on the same group chat. So that's a very good idea too. Are there any additional questions? Well, I hope I didn't confuse you all. Miss Penelope?
It wasn't a question. I just wanted to contribute another tip that Toastmasters uses is when you have a script, unless it's in a notebook, but if you have the loose pages for any section, put the page number in all four corners.
Oh.
Because that way, if it slides on the desk, let alone if it falls on the floor, but if you're just sliding it discreetly across the lectern in front of you, you can see that the page numbers are in order, and that saved me a bunch of times.
Okay, that's a good idea. I'm writing all these down. Any additional questions? Well, thank you again for the privilege to be here. I hope that you found some little nugget in this that was helpful to you. So thank you very much. You all have been wonderful. And that's it. I'll turn it back over to Jean-Paul, the Toastmaster. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I learned a lot. I am sure I was looking at people. They had good questions.